Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling. I shall see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today. Where it's a bit of a late night recording, because I'm going to record this, then I'm going to go have a shower. Normally I do it the other way around, but I was like, no, I'll do it this way around this time. But yeah, late night recording, because it was D&D session. It was for Mr. Lally Wonders group, and I think it was a pretty good one. It's a rare one because I haven't done it as much with them, but I would basically liken it to more of a puzzle-based one. But anyway, good evening everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow it's 11:22 PM on Monday, March 2nd, 2026. Yes, it's definitely a type of session which I don't do very often with this group, mainly because I feel like a lot of the time the best thing is often kind of like roleplay sort of events which have potential to basically be silly in, because I mean I said this before, like some of the people are like actors. I think there's a mix of actors and instigators within my plays for my D&D campaigns, with some other sort of things as well, like a bit of storyteller mixed in, bit of I forgot what the other one is, but one who investigates or whatever it's called, and a little bit mix of like what we call warriors, soldiers or something. I don't remember. But it definitely feels to me that instigation and roleplay is like kind of the biggest element. So that's often why a lot of the things are around that. You know, one of the groups is more about like roleplay, learning about the lore of the world and roleplaying with the characters, and the other one tends to be, if anything, it's also roleplay kind of with the characters, but often like give them opportunities to do something silly, be something weird, like yes and them essentially. So it's not that often, because puzzle solving is, one, difficult to do, because it's something I can't really playtest. I just have to sort of vibe and be like, I hope this is good enough. And two, it's also like, I think my players enjoy it, but I think they enjoy, in my personal opinion, I don't think they have as much joy of being like, here's a puzzle, solve this puzzle, as much as so of like, what's the fun part? Well, the fun part is reward, I suppose, and getting feeling rewarded afterwards, or solving a lore puzzle, putting together a lore puzzle. Making a connection like that seems like the most fun part. So it's often quite difficult, I find, to do these sort of puzzle dungeons, and often I don't find it that necessary. Maybe my friends do actually love them, the puzzle part, in which case I'm sorry, but I don't do it as often. But it's also really, it's one of the harder ones, I think, to prep for, because it requires a lot for. But I did it once before with the other campaign, much earlier on. I did like a much longer dungeon, which basically I kind of used them as like a testing grounds of like trying a lot of different things, seeing like what sticks or what worked well, what didn't work well, what was the best way to run it. And I certainly learned a lot from my experience. So I was like, okay, let's do a similar thing this time. But with this group, I didn't do nearly as large a puzzle dungeon, because I think they probably would find it too frustrating at the end. The other group, at least, you know, I think most of them enjoyed it. Some of the puzzles, I'm just like, okay, that was clearly a miss, but it was also like an experiment to try and see what different puzzles were liked or were not liked, which I could thankfully take going forward. But this group finally had their sort of big lore drop. Didn't have as crazy a reveal as I think. Like, it wasn't as crazy, or didn't have quite the reaction compared to the other group, which I think is totally fair and didn't expect, because this group is not, I think that see, there's the thing to say. Well, I'm not going to call out my friends necessarily, because I don't think there's anything bad. I think one of my friends in this group, one of the players in this group, does like investigating lore, I suppose, and the world, kind of, but she's also very good at not having a massive reaction to these sort of things. One of the other group, they tend to have a big reaction, and to be fair, it was structured in a different way, but it came out in a big roleplay lore moment. This one came out in more of like exploration moment. So I still think it's, from the discussion upwards, I think we still find it interesting. Again, this is like sort of planting early seeds of what it essentially means, but you know, it is part of what the main story is of this world. I will say that the two different groups have two different parts of the main lore of the world, so how they investigate it, I suppose, is up to them in the end. But it's a very exciting thing. But yeah, it was an interesting sort of puzzle, because it was like the first part of the puzzle was just straight up classic dungeon puzzle. But basically they got a riddle to the entire dungeon, and I didn't make it quite straightforward. I didn't make it be like, here's the dungeon riddle, do it. It's actually, if anything, it was more like a refer to what was once previously said. where they got the riddle very early on, and then they got a lot of descriptions about things, of random things they said, and I listed off a load of random things with the idea that like, oh, they'd maybe put that aside, and then they got to a door with a different riddle on it, but then the solution that they had to do was for the initial riddle in the first place, because that initial riddle didn't have a puzzle that seemed to go with it. And then they figured that out, they obviously tried to do the riddle on the door for the riddle, but I was like, no, that'd be too easy that way. But I did also, to be fair, hint them very early on that it didn't seem like it was the right time to do it, because the first riddle was basically, what they just had to do was just make sure they were in shadows and prostrate themselves, so like bow down. And then the second one was basically collecting different gifts for each of the divine and the pantheon, one for each of them. I'm not going to go too much further into detail, because while this group campaign knows, and I'm pretty sure the other campaign knows kind of about it, but we don't know further details about it, but there was a revelation essentially to be planting the seeds of, firstly in that. But basically they saw that riddle on the door and they were like, okay, let's find gifts. But then they did also question, being like, where do we put these gifts? And then I was like, oh, it doesn't look like there's a very obvious place to put them. And then we were like, oh, maybe it's the other riddle. So they actually did work out pretty quickly. And then they got into the next room. And then, okay, here the obvious place to put the gifts. Then this one was much more of an improv, I would say, puzzle, where it's not like, it doesn't have a fixed answer, but they basically had to have a gift which represents each of the domains. A unique gift. And I would have accepted quite a few different things, to be honest. Because there were things which I'm like, I think this is what they'll do. Some of them I was also like, I'm not sure what they'll do, but we'll see. But yeah, I think some of the notable ones was like one of the deities I would have accepted if they like told a secret about that character as a gift. And one of them about like factual information. I'm trying to think what else was an interesting one. Some of like the jewelry or precious items they had also would have been fine. Perfume they were carrying. They often go fishing. One of the deities would have accepted fishing equipment essentially. I'm trying to think what other ones were interesting off the top of my head. It's a bit difficult to think like that. But there are things which I, in my mind, were like, this is what I expect. Like one of them was what I expected. They did, like, I expected them to put gemstones or crystals in, and that's what they did. One of them was a mirror, which was kind of what I expected, but I also was like, they could do a lot of like any very pretty looking thing, because they had perfume, and I was like, perfume makes a lot of sense for this one as well. What was one I didn't expect? One of them I didn't quite expect was one of them was basically to do with life and light, essentially. And I kind of expected them to light a candle and put it in. But they actually did healing magic, and I was like, okay, I can see that's working, to be honest. And then the other one, which was to do with like dreams and secrets, I was like, okay, yeah, they can tell a secret, or they can put something magical in. But then they put a bedroll in, and I was like, okay, I will allow it. Seeing as she is to do with like dreaming and sleeping, so I'm like, okay, that kind of works. I found it very amusing. And then the next part of the puzzle they had essentially was, I can't say too much more about like what's going on in the dungeon or like why it mechanically works that way. There is a reason for it. They didn't really investigate that any further, so that's fine, they don't need to. But then basically these statues like appeared, which had very difficult to make out features, and then there was basically a zoetrope kind of thing in the middle, which the silhouettes combined with the right statue made it look like the actual thing. And then there was a riddle which basically said we had to say their name and the epithet of the deity, and so they did that, and it would basically lock it in, and they had to do that, and that was when they got their sort of revelation. And I would say that I was a bit worried about this revelation, because I was like, it might be a bit difficult to get. I can't exactly say why necessarily, but like half of it is something that they would have no way of knowing, essentially, because it's never come up before. It would only come up in this dungeon. The other half has been something which has been spoken about since the very, very beginning of the session, the campaign, way at the beginning. And I even made sure to explicitly get one of the characters very early on to explicitly say this piece of information. And then, you know, I brought it up basically at every opportunity that was relevant, and even in the session before, it was extremely relevant. So I was like, this is a good place to bring it up once again to remind them, yes, this is something they currently know about. And then they basically got to that point where they were like, okay, we know that this is the last thing we have to do. We found the part that we didn't know. And I basically, on a meta level, they were just like, I don't think the answer is that, we just had to sit here and guess. And I was like, you literally could if you wanted to, because you do know this information, and I know you know this information, because, spoiler alert, one of the players actually said it before, when they didn't have the other half of a clue. And I was very much like, oh, she put it together, she worked it out, that's incredible. But to be fair, another one of the players also, she worked it out as well. And again, I'm being so vague about it because I don't want to say anything, because the other campaign, they might watch this and they don't know about it, but I'm pretty sure that they have a guess, but they don't know these details about it. But one of the players did actually work this out and put it together, being like, oh, maybe this is to do with this because of this strange law related thing, which was also something which I mentioned way early on near the beginning. About why, and I'm glad that is one of the most satisfying things as a DM, to be like, oh, I built a world cohesive enough that they could put together information like naturally together to solve something. They can naturally uncover a mystery of a world, and I'm just like, oh, that's brilliant. Because I don't think my world's the best written one in the world. There's probably lots of plot holes, there's things which don't make sense, a lot of it's wishy-washy, a lot of it's vague. But the fact that they managed to do that is forever going to make me super happy, I think. Because it's tough. It genuinely is quite tough. But the fact it happened is sort of just like an indication that it's possible, if anything. Which makes me happy. And I was kind of thinking about this because I finished the Honkai Star Rail Amphorius quest now. I haven't done the epilogue quest, but I've done the main quest. I've done the Cyrene patch 2.7. What can I say about Amphorius? I loved it. I loved the story so much. Because I think the story itself is a highlight. I do agree though, I think some of the storytelling is iffy. Like, I think it's overly obtuse. It's perhaps the way I'd put some of it. When it doesn't need to be this obtuse. Like, you will get the point across in similar sort of fashion. Because it's not even the fact I have flowery language, because I understand Amphorius is based off like Greek epics and stuff like that. But it's the one which definitely annoys me most is when one character says something in an overly taught flowery way, and then the other character responds saying basically the same information in an equally flowery way. But like, oh yes, we must wait until the seeds have taken root and died, and then from there new flowers can be born. And the other character comes in and says, yes, only then truly can the blooms be birthed from those which have been left behind, or something. It's like, yes, that's literally what the first character said. You don't need to say it again. I got it the first time. But at the same time, I'm someone who loves that. I eat that up like this obviously ridiculous, like that's my guilty pleasure of reading. It's like just overly flowery, over the top language. Because I don't know, I just find it kind of fun. Anyway, I love the story. There's so many. What I found most interesting about the Star Rail story is that how much of it I thought I knew because I had picked up from other bits and pieces of people talking about it, but realised, oh, it turns out I didn't actually know what the story was, or I misunderstood. Some major beats I did understand. Like, obviously I knew kind of like who a certain character was, or how something kind of worked, but there was lots of it I didn't know. I'm trying to think of how to say it without giving it away, but I would say the existence of an extra character I knew about, but also theorized, because Ashkai is really good at making videos and she theorized about it, so I already knew about the theory. But the true nature of the character, I suppose, I didn't know about. Anyway, so exciting, so good, loved it. I'm interested to see what the other stories are like, which I've missed out on. I don't know if it'll be the next one I catch up on. I might try and catch up on Genshin first before. No, I probably will try and catch up with Star Rail because I want to do Plain Arcadia, to be honest. But I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, it's so exciting to have lore cohesive enough that one of my players was able to make, or two of my players in two separate instances were able to make an inference from a lore that they know, and about basically how the lore that they know does not line up with the information that they were given in this session. And able to come to a natural conclusion from that law I've made. That was beautiful. Because in some ways it gives me hope that if I were to sit down and actually properly write out a story of literature or something, I could give a reader that same sort of feeling of like theorising, where they'd be like, oh, did you see this? What does that mean? I wonder what this means. And then maybe there would be an ashikai of my own law or something that I've made. And she makes a video and I get to watch it and be like, wow, she basically got everything nailed on the head. Which not everyone does. Because then it's subtle enough that not everyone will get it, but also clear enough that someone did. That's the perfect balance thing. Anyway, the only thing would be if only there was like a greater reaction in some way. Anyway, but I think at that point I'm just being greedy for it. Because I don't know what I'm expecting my players to like jump around the room and be like, oh my god. I think that's too much. If anything, I would be surprised if they did. But anyway, on that note, I'm going to round this episode up here. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see you again. For now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.